So good day, ladies and gentlemen. We're pleased to welcome you here today. My name is Tamara Malkova, and I'm the head of the director of the Informational Center Green Dossier. And today we're about to present you with our work, the results of our main work. We're going to be presenting you with the roadmap and the results of the Project Ukrainian Green Pass from Farm to Fork. The project that has been implemented by our organization with the support of the International Renaissance Foundation and the European Union. And I would like to straight away pass the floor to Olga Gleshuk, who is the coordinator of the program of the European program for the International Foundation Renaissance. Yes, thank you very much, Tamara. Please, thank you very much for this invitation. We know that it's a very important discussion for all of us, and I would like to tell a little bit why the European Union and the Renaissance Foundation support those topics, because from the very beginning of year 2020, when we have had the European Green Deal that has been announced, and we've had multiple discussions going on this topic because we understand that that's an important topic for all of us. And it would have been very important for us to understand in what way Ukraine can be integrated into those decisions, because we're not the European Union member yet. And automatically, we are not obligated to follow the European Green Deal, but we have to be the part of all of those processes taking place. And our experts have provided those expert analysis that has become this important contentful platform for us to be able to discuss with all of our stakeholders, with our executive institutions, in what way Ukraine can support the new Green Deal, how we are ready to be integrated into those processes. And it's a pleasure for me that the Green Dossier has joined us and it's this expert group that has designed this preliminary document. Starting from year 2020, we have started the big project that is titled EU for Society with the support of the European Union taxpayers. And with one of the main direction was the introduction and implementation of the Green Deal in Ukraine as well. We have supported 7 projects last year. The project that will be mostly targeted to analyze those trends that currently are in the European Union and analyzing the certain sectors as well, analyzing the transport strategy, working with the cycle economy, and we have had a very interesting event today, the one that has was connected to the green diplomacy in Ukraine. And it's a pleasure for us to understand that the level of discussion from different parties and the level of understanding of what it is that Ukraine has to do has increased. Thus, this year, we have been very active as well to support this new cycle of projects. The most important thing in this case for us is now we have a common understanding that European Green Deal is not that much about environment, but it is an environment-friendly and ecological approach to building different sectors. We're speaking about the energy, agriculture, which is, I do believe, the most important for us to discuss today. Because basically, we have the whole wide spectrum of analysis, and there's a whole wide spectrum of the tasks that we have to cover. And it's important that we have the expertise in that, and our partners are able to provide that, and that we are able to show in what way Ukraine can go through this path from farm to fork, how we can join it, how we can be integrated into those processes to the fullest, so that when all of those implementations are going to be implemented in the EU, we will not just say that we want to do that. Okay, we have to plant the seeds now so that we will be able to see them grow and we would be able to harvest the results in the future. And I really would like to see the good results from the experts, and I wish us the productive discussion for today. Thank you very much, Olga. I think that we can then switch to presentation straight away then. If it's possible, yes, please. No, then I will start with the first presentation. Okay, our project, the Ukrainian Green Pass from Farm to Fork, step by step. Well, basically, we had a publication on this topic, and we have published the roadmap, and the roadmap, maybe we can send you the link for this publication and for the roadmap that we have developed and designed, because we have signed it, we have written it all in details in our publication, what has to be done and how we can reach that. But we have given it in pictures, basically, in the roadmap. And you can compare the written parts and you can compare the descriptive part, because every step that has been given in pictures, you can find the description in the document itself. But I would like to say, first of all, why it is important, why we have decided to talk about this topic, why it is needed right now. It just will be a couple of words, because I do believe everyone has a common understanding why that's needed. We have the climate change happening all over the world. This is the reality that we live in. And this is our main basis that we're starting with. This is our main starting point. That is the most important idea for us, why the transformation of our practices is needed and why this transformational path has to be green. We now see the depletion of the natural resources. We have to change our approaches to production. The world is now choosing climate neutrality. And different countries all over the world have joined those initiatives proclaiming the climate neutrality, proclaiming the new climate goals. It has happened all the time in the last few years. There is a whole wave going all over the world, and Ukraine cannot stay aside of it. We have to be included into this movement. We have to join it as well. There's no other way for us. The new European Green Deal that has been announced 2 years ago, it touches all of us. It touches all of us directly. It touches all of our farmers, and it touches every aspect of our life as well. And our main task with that would be to use these opportunities that the European Green Deal gives us and try to avoid those threats that we have, and the threats that we have to understand in the best way. Throughout last year, we have been very active. We have been very active in exploring different materials from different international organizations. We have been going through the materials from the media and publications from the media of different countries, the publications from our colleagues, from our NGOs. And we have published and we have designed, provided the information constantly. We have revised everything that was going on in the European Union, everything that was going on in the world on this topic. All of this information can be found at our sites. You can find it at the Green Dossier website and the Organic Info website. Based on those materials that we have researched, we have built our own roadmap and our own explanations, and we're really grateful to those organizations that participated in our discussion, that has invited us to their discussions as well. So our basically all of our publication has been divided into two big main parts. The first part being the production parts, and the second part was the consumption. So first of all, we have to talk about those changes and about those steps that have to be taken in the production sector, in the production of the food. And this is why I would like to pass the floor to Olga Ignatenko, who has been responsible for this part, the production part. She covered this part and she's going to explain us with this production part overall. Thank you. Thank you, Tamara. Well, let us start with the very beginning. Let us discuss, why do we need to have a transformation in the agriculture sector? Because a lot of people, they believe that something is like this. We are growing something, it's all green, it's not kind of a heavy metallurgy production. We do nothing, basically. We're just, growing plants and food. We're growing cereals. We're trying to breed cattle, that's all. But basically, it's not like that. The agriculture is the has a big impact for the emissions of the greenhouse gases. Due to agriculture, we have a lot of losses of biodiversity due to fermentations of the ecosystem, due to extensive land use. It is basically 30% of all of the emissions of the greenhouse gases. Well, those are the greenhouse gases that the agriculture is responsible for. We're speaking about the cattle breeding, first of all, the big cattle breeding farms, and this is due to the till, due to the plowing that we use for the land processing, and using the machinery, and for example, damaging the big natural territories, for example, like deforestation, when the big parts of the forest are being cut down to provide the additional land for cattle breeding or for growing additional crops that are not used for food but are used for the industrial feeds. So due to what has happened, due to those big changes happening, the environment is not what it used to be before. We have experienced the loss of the biodiversity. We have lost the opportunities for the biosystems work in the systems overall through the degradation of the soils, through the changes of the climate conditions for the products. And basically right now, the traditional, for us, traditional in understanding of growth and traditional in for us, for the systems that have been built already for 50, 70 years that do not work. So we have had the overall conditional significantly changed, and the significant impact for those methods that we use has been way too big. So we have to change something, even economy-wise, that has already become problematic. For example, due to those ideas that the prices for the energy carriers has increased, we have increased the overall spendings for the ecological environmental tax, for the emission tax. So right now the traditional costs for fuels, for additional agricultural products, they are growing, and the traditional models, they work in a worse way. The changes are also needed from other points of view. With the development of green transformation, with the switching to the green models of economy, the agriculture also is a source for us to switch to those technologies. So the fossil fuels are going to be replaced by bioresources for the biomass, for example, or they're using additional materials for garments, for tissues, for other movements that can be also replaced by the natural segments that can be grown by the agriculture. So we have the competition increase between producing food and producing the resources so that our agriculture could function properly and so that our economy could function properly. Those things are very important, and it's important how we will address those problems and how we will change and ways and the models of production. All over the world, these questions have already been raised, and first of all, most of the experts, they come to an agreement that the existing systems, they do not work, they're broken, they work in a very bad way. So the system, when some of the foods are being created and then there can be once again transported to the big distances, they doesn't work. On the other way, the schemes when we are wasting a lot of amounts of food, the losses are very big towards part of the world, and we are the food goes to waste. In other parts of the world, there's nothing to eat. We have the decrease of the consumption on the local level. Like someone who's, for example, is now consuming some avocados in the European Union or some kind of meats, they might be influencing the environmental situation significantly in the other part of the world. For example, they maybe have a direct effect for the deforestation of the tropical forest, the Amazonian and the Amazonian forest. So we have to switch to new systems. We have to switch to new systems where we will not have that kind of a huge impact. So what have we got up to? If the system do not work, if it's not ecological, we have to change the approach of growing our foods. Up to this moment that we have to consider our growing practices as a part of the ecosystem. We have to consider the field, we have to consider the animal farm as a part of the ecosystem all around it. So it will be able to function as a part of the ecosystems and provide the very same services as the ecosystem has been provided. Maybe it to the smaller scope, maybe not in that broad the spectrum, but for it to be able to function, and not only to be the consumer of the services, but to be the provider as well. There are a couple of approaches to that, the environmental approach and using the nature-oriented solutions. What do we mean by the environment-oriented solutions? Those are the most so the solutions that we've used before and that we are aware of, but they are targeted to resolving certain problems like the food production or mitigating the outcomes, environmental and social outcomes of the production and agricultural production. But in the same time, we can use the ecosystems as the center of it. It has to be ecosystem oriented so that the ecosystem would be providing the resources needed and so that the ecosystems would not have the great transformation for the ecosystem to be able to support itself. The simple example would be the composting of the plant's leftovers or just to leave it on the field as currently have been widely used and widely spread, for example, like burning the leftovers. It actually goes to this moment that the farmers, they are not aware of what else you can do with those leftovers overall. But those are the very simple things and nature-oriented, environment-oriented models that will help us to improve the effectiveness of those models. Another international approach is to providing incentives for farmers for those nature-oriented and environmental-oriented services and approaches. For example, the very same European Union has this biodiversity strategy, according to which 10% of the agricultural farms have to be provided as the places for wild nature. So you have to have additional lanes or additional migration corridors that would at least imitate wild nature that might be the home for different species of animals and plants and where the biodiversity can be developed. For example, there might be other ecosystem services can be provided. For example, they can be as filters for additional and for the nutritious elements from the fields. There may be additional place for the watering of the water basins so that the water basins would function in the proper way. So there are other services as well that the ecosystems can be provided. And there are the systems for the incentives of incentivizing the farmers for those kind of services. This is something that we don't have yet, but what do we have? The current models, they do not work as well. If we will listen to the farmers, the real farmers that are working on the land, right in the field right now, we will understand that almost everyone are telling us the story how they're losing their harvest, how they're using their yield, how hard it is for them to survive, how problematic it is to do anything at all. Last year, with a lot of droughts, has caused the significant losses for a lot of farmers overall. So we're quite clear that it doesn't work. It doesn't work like we used to it. Those fields of green rye, it doesn't work like that. It will not be able to function like that in our conditions. Plus the climate change and environmental change, they're also having some changes happening. There has to be the changes in the production lines as well. As it worked for 20 or 30 years ago, it cannot work right now. The conditions have changed significantly. We have small part, but important part of the producers who are using this environmental friendly approaches, mostly because they believe that it's the good thing to do. It's better for me to be doing something else. I have to do it. I'm not going to be negatively influencing and impacting the environment because it is something that I need first of all. And on the other hand, they all actually understand that those models have certain advantages. For example, we have a highly developed network of organic producers. Most of those organic producers, they were really conscious in turning to the organic production. We have biodynamic producers, which was a very big revelation for me. There are quite a lot of them. Like on the overall systematic level, that's not enough, but they are not just singular cases. We have the permacultural production, but basically because people have started to do that with their own initiatives because they understand that we have to decrease the impact. And it really matters what kind of impact your production has for the environment and what your production has for the social as well. The big producers, they understand it as well. Everyone understands, but the big producers, they also understand that all the approaches that they do not work because they are losing out in their economical models as well. They already have certain resources, certain knowledge. They're looking for the answers, and they have the resources in order to implement those changes of the models. But still, we have a lot of small and medium producers. For example, according to the data of our geocadastre, 30% of our land is being processed by our agricultural producers with the overall size of 2 hectares. They don't have resources, they don't have a common understanding how you can grow something in a different way. They understand that something has to be changed because it doesn't work. It physically doesn't work. Economically, it's really hard. The conditions have changed. The problems are constant, but they do not know. They don't know. They don't understand what they can change. This is the situation we're living in. What can we do? How can we change? In what way we can change something? How can we break the system? First of all, there is a tremendous need for us to start this discussion in the society, to open the access to the information. What else? How else can we do that? What else can we use? What people all over the world have tried already to implement? How does that work? How successful is that? How can we adapt those conditions to our models? Because there's not a single recipe that would work for everyone, for every model, for all of the climate zones, for every household, understanding their own peculiarity and conditions. There's going to be a separate solution in place, but it has to be based on those agroecological, agroenvironmental approaches so that we will be able to decrease the impact for environment and to increase the economical resilience for those production models. And this is something that is needed for all of us. We have to give the information what works bad, what works, what doesn't work. We have to include it to the educational programs, and this discussion has already been established and started. We have to add up those programs into university. We have to give the information of what there is, what there is the other programs, what are the conditions for the implementations. We have to discuss it overall. We have to give this outline for the businesses as well, what is going on all around the world, how the international models of production have been transformed. So another thing that has to be there and that has to be provided for the international discourses, the knowledge of legislation, something I have been constantly facing, that the parties are not aware that they're doing something illegal. There's a constant problem. The illegal plowing of the productive lines, or illegal plowing of the slopes, that is basically illegal. There is a tried the opportunity to plow and till in the reservations as well. The abuse of usage of the water basins. The producers, they might not be aware that they're doing something illegally. If, for example, the big producers, they have the big legal departments, they might know about that. So the small producers have never known about that. I don't know what had happened. People do that from the beginning of the time, and I'm doing it like just like that, and like just get off me. So all of those things, they have to be brought up to the overall national discussion so that we would be aware of that. Another point is like, how can we make the transformation happen? What is needed for us to start the transformation? First of all, we have to start considering the food production and farmship not from the point of view of what is the economical need for that, but what is the environmental and social need for that as well, because the impact of farmers are huge. Farmer is an actor that has a lot of impact, but they might not be aware of it. People, they never see that. People do not understand that, because what do they think? That the farmer is responsible for whether they will use more pesticides and whether they will use destroy the biodiversity. They're influencing the beekeepers and bees because their practices can impact it hugely. They're impacting the health of the people around them, because basically whatever they will do will also be it will also depend the quality of water around them. So it has to be included into the assessment models for the production overall, especially for the agricultural production. Farmers are not just the consumers and the users of the ecosystem services, but they have to be the producers as well. So how can we do that? That also works all over the world already. We have to identify the best practices. We have to identify the practices that will have the least of the bad influence for the impact for the environment, or what has the positive impact for the environment. Those practices, they have to be identified with experts. There have to be a social dialogue with the local authorities, with the farmers, and with the professionals that will be able to evaluate the impacts, to assess the impact for those practices that are there. So we have to build this social agreement with that to identify the biggest practices that have the biggest impact that cannot be practiced even if they are not prohibited by the law. Why is that needed? For us to be able to identify the practices that have the biggest risks and the lowest risks. And then we have to consider those risks as ecological and social components to the production. And if we will provide the support, then we have to provide the support to the productions that have the least of the impact and to give the opportunity to export, not to close the opportunity to be really exporting to the companies and to the production that are using their production lines with the high risks. And another moment that can work properly, that also supporting the traditional production types when we didn't have tractors, what were really hard to plow everything around us because it was really hard to do. When we didn't have the irrigation system, so the other solutions were used that were also nature oriented, but they used to be so traditional for us that it felt normal for us. We don't even consider them as a high technological solutions, but basically they are what they are. And I will give you once again this comment that a lot of traditional models, they were also being based on the agroecological approach and as the production is a part of the ecosystem. And the support of the craft ecosystems in production, they are small and they're using these traditional practices multiple times and they work the best and they have the least of the risks. And our Ministry of Agricultural Policy, they already making their efforts for the support of this kind of production line, but it has to be done as well. We have to have the list of the best and the worst practices so we will be able to evaluate those productions properly. In what way we can make our producers to switch to the production with the lowest impact? First of all, the support of the state, if it is available. If there are some subsidies, they have to be not unconditional, but conditional. After we evaluate the risks of the production, only for those people who are using the production practices with the low risks, only then it will make sense. And we also have to put up those risks in financial support. If banks will not give you the credit, the loans, with the practices with the very high risks, then they have to pay the real price for the big risk they have. The ecological and social risks are the financial risks as well, and it has to be shown in the financial support and the availability of the finances. And it's a really good thing that our national bank a month ago has addressed the new policy of the sustainable financial support. Well, it will be compulsory to year 2024. All of the financial institutions, they should have the tracking of the ecological and social risks for those ecological products that they will be crediting for, and they have to report on that. But the banks on themselves, on their own, they will not be able to take a look at what the high risks or the low risks. The professionals, after the discussion, have to provide them with those methodological recommendations where they will clearly see that's good, that's bad, and there's something somewhere in between. And so that it would be standardized in the same way for all of the financial institutions, and then we will have the really good conditions for the financement, and there will be better for the farmers to use that for their loans as well. They will be able to take this money and they will be able to practice more sustainable practices. Another thing is about the green taxes. It's the question for most of the green players right now. Those are the questions for the fiscal code, because right now our legislation does not include multiple things. For example, the usage of the very intensive plowing or the teal policies when we are having a lot of losses from the CO2 from the soil. So it hasn't been depicted in any way. We have to review it and we have to add up the additional documents that will include the negative practices that may have a very relevant impact to the way that people are going to be considering those practices. Another case is the green obligations that will be able to finance the transformation, the approach from one model to a different one. And in order to use these green obligations, we have to have a clear division to what practices can be used, what practices are sustainable, and what practices cannot be used for these green obligations. And if they're used for the transformation, then we have to have it correspondingly with the practices with a low impact for the society, for the environment, and the practices with high products. The CO2 credits. When, for example, we don't have any additional payments for the provision of the ecosystematic services, the market of the ecosystems approach, they can give some additional support to those people who provide it. In case of the CO2 credits, it's meaning about that they can provide the services for capturing the CO2 and the process of encapsulating the CO2 in soils. But we have to have the clear conditions of how it can be done, how the certification will be provided, and we have to have a clear division between the state emission that can be then calculated in the nationally divided in the national identified contribution, and those credits that are free that can be used as the CO2 credits and that can be sold in the markets. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, from as far as we've understood from this part, all of this production for the overall foods have to be changed. So the next part for us would be the discussion of how should we change the consumption. Yes, the other way around. Okay, and I would like to pass the floor to Nadia Shevchenko. She has worked on this topic more, and she's going to tell us a little bit more about that. Yes, I will try to be very brief, so I would actually be in time because all of the other things can be seen in our infographics and in my reports. And I do hope that we will have also the Q&A session in the end, so we'll be able to discuss it even more detailed. So as we have already said, this transformation for the food systems, and we're speaking about the composition of all of the elements and activities that are connected to the division, preparation, and consumption of the food. And as it has been said, there are two main components, which is the production of the food and the consumption. You know how our diets have been built. It has been a very different. Well, our diets were built due to the sustainable supply of foods, of biofossils and biodiversity, bioclimatical conditions around, everything has changed. So we know that inevitably, as the experts have forecasted already, and the experts have said, we are looking forward to the biggest changes in the next decades, the biggest changes in history, the changes that are going to be happening in these systems for the both production and consumption. That is an inevitable process, an inevitable moment, because we will not be able to resolve the big problems of the world as the climate change, as the tremendous resources of waste that are impacting the emission level, and we will not be able to resolve the issue of the food safety and for providing the foods that will be available for everyone. And we will not be able to reach those ambitious goals that we have stated for ourselves as the world. So reaching the goals of the Paris Agreement or reaching the Sustainable Development Goals as well. Thus, okay. So in order to do that, we will, like for Ukraine, we will have to develop. For other countries, that is mostly the continuation of design and the implementation of the state policies and tools. And in this case, we have to once again reinvent the wheel in this case. And as it has already been shown by the international experience, one of the first and one of the most important steps for the tools in overall in these policies is about the national recommendations. Has anyone heard about that? No, the national dietary recommendations. It turns out to be that this is a tool that is actually follows the scientifically approved document, the nationally approved document with the overall recommendation about sustainable and healthy nutrition diets. So this national diet plans and recommendations, they are one of the most important issues for the state policies in the healthcare. They are the tools of promoting and changing the cultures of consumption. So this is one of the documents that you can use for finding the information for both producers and consumers. Okay, now I've got how the click works. Okay, good. Those are the cases, those are the recommendations, and those are the examples or more ambitious time corresponding diets. They are almost the same. So we have to consume less. As my colleagues have already said, we have heard about the impact of agriculture. So we have to consume less. So it's quite clear that we have to decrease that the number of the products of the animal origins almost by 2. It is recommended to go down at least with one of the alternative recommendations from the authoritative and scientific sources that was the commission Inland from Inland. So that is recommended to decrease the animal origins products almost by half, and to supplement it, to shift it, to substitute it with the plant-based products. So that is called as the planetary or the flexible. It's also called a flexible diet model because it doesn't require the really big movement and change of the diet from all of the people to switch to vegetarian or vegan nutrition. And the experts, they say that what they have been also saying that we have to at least cut it by 2, just to have meat twice a week. And we know that before that, to this green age, or those green age of what we've had last century, we didn't have meat that much. So in practice, you don't have to have a lot of changes with that because, human body is adapted to this type of nutrition and to this type of diet with eating meat just twice a week. Moreover, there is a lot of experience with the European Union and with the political tools for incentivizing the transformation of the nutritional chains, the certifications and standardization that has to be completed in our country, that we have to still develop, and harmonizing our practices with the practices of the European Union, the changes of the marketing approaches and marketing practices, the sustainability of the state procurement are going to be changing the overall consumption culture as well. First of all, due to providing the minimum required criteria for the state procurement, especially if we're speaking about the children diets, or for hospitals or kindergartens or other state financed and state supported institutions. We understand that it will require some additional fiscal discounts and other tools of support. Right now, it's been forecasted that starting from the next year, we're going to be revising those notions about what the price for food is and what is the value, and what is the basically the price, the value, and the cost, because it has to include the real costs for that. So we have to understand those costs that are going to be including the influence for the environment and the real resources that are needed to produce this food. For the very first of us, for the raising the awareness, we need to have the adequate primary policy that will be the resources for the informing education, and there's going to be stimulating the switching to the right, to the sustainable policy, to the sustainable choice in our diets, in our rations. And I will give you maybe those tools that we are already aware of, to what we know through the already existing international practices. And I think that we can take a look at that in our report. We can take a look at the details. And of course, it has been very important to also to decrease the overall food waste and to decrease the losses. This is something that it happens before the food has gone into for the tables of our customers, whether it's about the homes or the production. And the waste is something that is being thrown away through different reasons, to the due time, through that we haven't read the date in the right ways, the best for or consumed before. And there is a lot of misunderstanding between that. So that we have already started developing different kinds of tools and economical tools as well. And for the simulation and incentivizing of the right way to manage food waste. And we understand that the resolution of this problem is about the circular economy. The circular economy offers some really interesting approaches to making the right decisions in this case. Then, again, understanding and remembering in what way we have been building our industrial food systems in the middle of the last century, when the production of food wasn't industrialized as well. In certain contexts, especially under the impacts of losses of the biodiversity, under pandemic, under the climate change, we see the weak parts of this, the weak sides of that, the weaknesses of this really long industrial chains of supply. We can see how it works in the worst way, when they are more fragile and when the connection between the participants of this chain is almost being lost. So that is why we have seen that under the pressure of those challenges, we have seen that we're starting to establish shorter supply chains that have a lot of benefits to them. It's not just about the geographical decrease of the distance, so there is no need for us to relocate for the longest distance, or you understand as well that you are improving its resilience, its inclusivity. It is something that stimulates the development of local communities, and it's something that also helps the development of local businesses. And here in this case, in this crisis, we see what is happening overall, because basically a lot of crises, they are working in this way. So it's whether about the pandemic or whether some kind of a geopolitical changes, or whether it's about droughts or any other challenges for the resources, for the production of resources. We understand that the very same approaches will work in here, the very same approaches on decreasing the overall food chain and activating the participation of all of the stakeholders. And we see how the European Union is currently going through the process of creating the action plans in the emergency situation, the response mechanisms. They are going through the very complex procedures of the impact assessment. And we, of course, understand that in our country, we would recommend the very same, to try to cope with the very same speed that the European Union has provided for the elements of response. And I would like to pass the floor to Mara for the conclusions. Yes, thank you very much. We're just like 5 minutes late. That's okay. That's okay. So basically, this is our roadmap with pictures for those people who are here today with us in the room. So you don't have it yet, but you can have it. Those are all the steps that have been shown, and you can see that the customers, consumers and producers, they have to find a joint way together. And I would like to once again to tell you once again that this is our vision of the green path for Ukraine, based on what we have studied throughout some long period of time, based on what we have compared, how we have compared the European Green Deal, the strategy from farm to fork, the strategy for biodiversity, how we have compared it to the situation that we have in Ukraine. And of course, we're really open for any kind of discussions or oppositions, amendments. And maybe we can have some questions right now, if you'll have some very brief questions, if you have any, and then we will start the discussion then. So do you have any questions? Yes, can we have the microphone then? Do we need to pass the microphone then? Yes, thank you very much. Well, I have two questions. One of the more general question to everyone, maybe to reflect on that, and the second question would be more precise. The questions are about those practices that we have to identify. How can we identify the whether those practices are climate friendly and environmental friendly? Because the research has shown us that when we're going to get to the organic production, agro-generative practices, the farmer that loses their income for first 2 or 3 years because the yield will decrease. How will you consider this moment as well? What kind of works have you had, especially for the Ukrainian farmers? That's important because they don't have this really big scope for the reserves that they can use, especially the money reserves. What would be your offers if we are supporting this transition to more sustainable practices, how we can resolve this issue of the loss of profitability for a couple of years when we're switching to that? I see that those results that you have presented, they are very alike to what European Union has done. Those are really good initiatives. But have you identified some of the specific risks for Ukraine specifically? Because we're still not the part of European Union yet. We have a lot of share in our trade with China, not just with Europe. So which of those steps might be very specific? What are the risks and the specifics for Ukraine? And was another question for the consumption, or I don't know whether it's not too many of those questions, but okay, the trends of eating meat in Ukraine. Ukraine is not closer to the European Union. We have around a 50 kilo per person. Europe has 80, 90 kilos per person a year, and the US has even more. So it's a recommendation about Ukraine. It's important for us to start this idea for the diets in Ukraine as well. But are there any risks that those trends are going to grow in Ukraine on the consumption of meat, and what are the other ways that the other countries use this for this switch as well? Can we use those recommendations right now already, and can we check this trend already, close this trend on the decrease of the consumption? Thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you. First of all, starting with how can we define the environmental methods? And I will just try to identify these two questions into one. How can we compensate the losses for the farmers? First of all, we always have to consider our reality. We have to put them into attention because under those realities, our farmers, they slightly surviving. We can see the decrease of yield, and our farmers are using their both money and yield. So changing their schemes of work of agricultural production will be even profitable for them. We have our own examples already when people in 2018, they have started the no-till growing and they haven't lost the yields from year 2018. So that's kind of a well-planned shift, and trying to prepare it slightly before to that in advance, they can minimize the losses of yield. Yes, especially if we're speaking about the small farms, they will not be able to cope with that alone. They will need to have some support. They will need to have the access to economical data, the access to the testing results as well. So we have to test out all of those things. We have to give them the research for that. So we need to have the research ideas. So we have to find the ways that will mitigate the bad conclusions, the bad outputs. So we have to discuss it and we have to do that. You cannot just say that this is the only way to go. It will not work like that. So that is why we need the dialogue, and that is why we need to hear from the farmer. What is easier for them? What will work for them? What will not? There are some things that do not require big efforts to that, but just have to do that. And the result would be seen there. Results will be seen sometimes in a couple of months. In most of the cases, yes, but sometimes it will be seen in a couple of years, yes. But the experience from the European Union, from the UK, and I have seen that a lot, that the UK right now is testing out, they're being on the brim of that. They're now even providing the subsidies and compensations for working with soil preserving technologies and improving the overall state of soils, because the soils is the best thing that exists right now on our planet. So yes, when farmers are switching to this agroecological changes, they can see the changes in a couple of months. Something that they haven't seen in generation is being restored, and the loss of yields is not felt that strongly as it could have. So we have to have a lot of good planning, then it will work properly. Then the green obligations. That is one of the reasons why the green obligations have been introduced. In order for us to do that, we will have to have the green taxonomy of the agriculture. And what you can do and how you can use it further on. There can be a lot of nuances to that. But basically, there's a lot of different models that can be also seen with the greatest ecological impact. There are those cases as well. When we get into the no-till growing, then there might be the soils. The soil, there's a lot of uncontrolled weeds coming. There's a lot of uncontrolled bacteria going on. So the increase of the pesticides can be seen as well. So we have to control it as well. And on the consumption, Nadia? Yes, I'm sorry. I would like to stop you for a second. So, because there's slightly, we're getting out of schedule right now. Those are very good questions, but we are switching to discussion now. But to switch to this kind of discussion is slightly early for us, because we really would like to hear some thoughts from our participants as well. We have a couple of additional speakers who have very precise offers. For example, we need to have the representative of the Office for the Effective Regulation, Irina Hruzinska, the head of the BRDO. She was supposed to be here, but unfortunately she has fallen ill, but we have to have her. We need to have Olesa Petrovic, who's going to also, she is the representative of the WWF Ukraine Foundation, and she is the coordinator on the Bringing Nature-Based Solution into Reform Agenda in Ukraine project coordination. So she will actually add up a lot to what we have discussed already. What we also see here, we know that we have Larisa Starikova, who's physically here with us, who is the head of the Analytical Center of Agricultural Union of Ukraine, and that's quite clear what this organization stands for. I'm going to be speaking about the proper agricultural practices, and Larissa knows how to say about that. We also virtually should have Anastasia Bilic, who is the head of marketing department at Arnica Group. So those are basically the representatives of farms, the farmers who are doing something, who are assessing something, who are calculating those carbon credits or whatever that is. And we also have our colleague from the European Environmental Bureau. We have our colleague Sofia Kayati, who is representing the European Environmental Bureau. And well, by the way, this is the organization that we have strongly collaborated for quite a long period of time already, and we have used their materials. And we have mentioned that in our publications, and we have referred to them in our publications as well, because there were professional materials that have been collected for multiple years, and they're dealing with the issue of agriculture for many years already. And we have seen this experience of European Union. We see how they struggle to have those common agricultural policy introduced, and we know how they have promoted those eco schemes. There are many discussions that they've had. I think it will be very interesting for us all to learn about how they did it. And so that is why I would like to ask us maybe to change our panel slightly. And I don't know, do we have the metro somewhere here, or that's okay? Okay, so we have seen the metro Shulha coming, but okay, he's disappeared again. Okay. So maybe we will change our panel a little bit. We will invite Larissa, Olesa to join us here. We will have 3 other people speaking online. And maybe we will also, we can see the head of the European program for the Renaissance Foundation, Dmytro Shulhan. Maybe he would like to join us as well. And would you like to participate if you really have the desire then?
Ага. Тобто у нас зараз є на зв'язку представник
So right now we have the representative of the BRDO representative. We have Artem, who is representative of BRDO. But why we actually wanted to ask them to have this presentation, why we want them to speak up as well, because they had conducted their own research on the introduction of the new European Green Deal in agriculture, and that was the research that they have conducted among the representatives of the agricultural sector. So can we pass the floor to Artem then? Yes, please. Hello. Can you hear me well, dear colleagues? So good day, dear colleagues. It's a pleasure for me to welcome you. It's a pleasure for me to see you at this kind of event. It has been a very interesting speakers and a very interesting topic that has been raised. The Office of Effective Response and has been at this stage responsible for developing the Green Book about this issue. And we have now been working on a survey on those specific topics that appear, that get into our attention. And as far as our topic has been very interesting topic for us, right now you might see at our site, you can see we have a survey for farmers and for the agricultural bodies. We really would like to learn their point of view about this situation of what did they think, what did they believe is happening right now. So basically, at this stage, the BRDO is currently working on our Green Book, and we are working on developing the materials on the Green Deal. And maybe we'll have some very precise questions to that. Yes, but what are the results? Do you have any conclusions already? No, not conclusions yet. We're just working on that. You know, the Green Deal, the Green Book is now basically not very fast results. So we're currently working in this direction. And we had these meetings in Anastasia village, for example. She's the one who's presented here at this panel. We have conducted our meetings with them. We have had meetings with the representatives of agricultural farms. So we are working on that, yes. Yes, you know, not all of the people were able to hear you, Artem. So there's a technical response for a question for request for you. Can you choose the Ukrainian channel for this panel? Okay, thank you. And I do believe that there might be this question for everyone. Yes, and maybe you can just give us a couple of words about what this Green Book would be. I don't know whether all of the people are aware of what that is. You know, the Green Book is that, how can I explain it in the right way? You cannot explain that in the right way. So basically the BRDO and our sector, directly of agricultural sector, the one that is responsible. I am the senior lawyer for the agricultural department for the BRDO office. The BRDO has been working through research, and one of the recent research that we've had was a Green Book on the technical weed market. And we can present it to you as well. But what the Green Book is about, so we are taking the issues that exist that are important on transforming Ukraine according to the international practices of joining the international markets, European markets. We are taking the main problematics, we are researching it, and we are trying to show it in specific projects so that we will be able to improve or sometimes to facilitate the collaboration between businesses and the state. For example, we have been developing the legislation that has simplified and facilitated the legislation choices for the Cabinet of Ministries and for the Parliament. In beekeeping, for example, we have been the ones who developed one of the decrees of the Cabinet of Ministries. So we are, in a way, trying to facilitate, how to put it this the right way, facilitate the contact between the businesses and the government. Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you very much. We have some questions coming up, but just try to be very brief. Yes, yes, very brief. Okay, good. Hello, good morning. Natalia Yakimenko, the head of Association of the Goat Breeders of Ukraine. I'm slightly nervous and I'm slightly nervous for the small producers and for our farmers, for our farms. I would like to ask you what were your works and considerations in this direction, because starting from 2012, we have announced the cooperation. The FAO has said that the small family farms owns 56% of production, of the food production, but our Ukrainian legislation is fully covering the idea of gigantic plants of the Soviet times, and there has been not a single change for the small producers. What we have seen happening throughout the recent times, there has been the sanitary gaps between the small family farms that are working with cows or goats, with the small production capacities for 300 or 500 liters of milk. They have to have this distance from their houses is 100 meters, but this state norms, they are outdated. When we're speaking about the security, they're not mentioned, they don't meet our requirements. Because if, for example, a farmer will come to this additional incentives for inside for farmers, but basically that when I'm getting to my architects and I'm paying a lot of money for the project to be developed because there is a state requirement for that, I'm building that, and then the state food service tells me that I have to replace my wall for 3 meters in advance because the architects did it wrong. And there are some problems with that, because the big producers, they believe they're way too smart and they're making a lot of mistakes to that. But the life of the Ukrainian village is something that really bothers me. How it's going to be reflected in the framework of your green book, and you really deals with that, and I can help you with that as well, because those are the questions everywhere from the construction norms, sanitary norms, and others. Well, yes, thank you very much. So do you have any comments to that? It's a very broad question. I don't think it's not just a question to us at the BRDO. I think it's to most of the participants. But I can only say one thing, that as I've already given it as an example, I've already told you that we are working with the Ministry of Agriculture, with the Ministry of Economy, and in order to resolve those problems, for example, speaking about the beekeepers, and we have introduced this order by the Cabinet of Ministries, and so we've corrected the opportunity for, in case, for example, that was poisoning of bees, and most of the times there might be the poisoning of bees from the farmers. So there was the opportunity to have a reimbursement for that, because we have seen the certain problems and certain gaps in Ukrainian legislation on that before. So there was something to my side. I can't hear you without the microphone. Sorry. No, what we've meant that basically they are not able to become legal. They do not work legally just because there are some really problems in the legislations. The people that have already existed, the craft producers, that whatever they do, but they're not working legally. Legal wise, physically, they cannot be legal producers until become they cannot work by the law. Yeah, okay. So let us work into this direction, because this is the problem that is still unknown for us yet. Because, for example, when people are addressing us, the beekeepers, the irrigation systems. We're working in different directions. Just let us work on this together. Okay, so we have a lot of things to work with. Okay, thank you very much, Artem. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you, Natalia, for your questions. Okay, as far as I understand, that we need to put it as one of the ticks for the future collaboration, because this is going to be one of the tasks of the really broad list. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yes, the tasks and problems. There's a lot of tasks and problems that we have to work on. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much once again. Let us switch to our next participant, Olesya Petrovich, the representatives of the WWF Ukraine, and what is going to be our adaptation, and what are those things, these offers that we provided in our roadmap, what are those offers, whether they refer to your vision as one of the biggest and widest known organizations in the world, environmental organization in the world. Yes, hello, good day. I was really looking forward to take a look at this roadmap, and was really looking forward to the results of your project. And because our project is basically going to be using the legacy of your projects, and we're going to be using your results as well and making the next step as well. We will help to make the next step for the agriculture and for the nature production, and to combine it into different sectors and the different sectors of activity. So do you have my presentation? I've sent the presentation. Yes, okay, thank you very much. As you can see that the title is the usage of the nature-oriented solutions, and the main the use nature-based solutions, the main climate adaptation in Ukraine. So it's all includes that. So we need to prepare some new legislation maybe as well, and we have to be aware of the existing legislation that is very important overall. Those are the tasks of our projects as well. But as far as we the nature saving organization, so we have our own point of view to these questions. And can I have the next? Oh, okay, good. Okay, thank you. So yes, the climate change, it's our current reality. I'm not going to tell you precisely, I'll be honest with you, when I have heard about that 15 years ago, I thought like, oh, come on, I'm a biologist and ecologist. I was not really, I didn't even believe that. But right now, I'll try to analyze my not quite that long life. I have already felt the climate change with my own experience, and I have seen the changes in our nature, in our environment. And I know that these changes are also the responsibility of human activities. And the scientists have been discussing this issue from different parts of view. They see the correlation between the overall amount of the CO2 emission and the climate change and the average temperature increase. You can see that these graphs, what you see on the slide, those are depicting the best scientists of our planet. They have shown us this correlation and connection. The forecasts made for Ukraine, the scenarios for the climate change and the variation of the climate there's a lot of those scenarios, and you can see there are different colors for Ukraine, different maps for Ukraine, the mild scenario, the harshest scenario. So that's all will influence our state in a different way. But people are saying that we're going to feel the climate change the most in Ukraine through water. And at these slides, then you can see that there's overall decrease of the participation level. We can discuss the different threats from the scientific point of view, but if we will think about it in a simpler way, for both farmers, big or small, what is it that influences their everyday life and everyday activity? They're going to the fields on a daily basis, they're going to see the nature, but we'll be honest, there's not a lot of nature left of this nature. We have a field, the agricultural systems, and we have the field with a specific crop, that requires not just the sunlight, but some certain temperatures and some certain level of moisture. So basically, that's all about all of those moments. And what are those impacts that are influencing our activities and influencing our life? And we have spoken about that. We will need the moisture, we will need the temperature. So we've had one scenario of the participation before. So right now there has been the crops that have been used to that. The scenario changes sometimes more, sometimes less, and the participation they don't really work in the time when it's needed. When we have the big rainfall, what the rainfall does, the flooding, how can we use this water? Is it just going to hold it all in the landscape or whatever to do that? The droughts, there was no rain, there was a drought, and everything burns down. So we not only see the overall change for the rain amounts, but the winds are changing. The strength of the wind has changed, which also might cause some long forgotten moment as the wind, snow, sandstorms in Ukraine as well. And this also will causes the loss of the yield. The temperature changes and temperature fluctuations. Yes, plus 4 degrees in Ukraine. If it would have been averagely every day, then it wouldn't have been just the same. Everything would adapt to that. But the problem is that this +4 averagely they come because at some point of time we will have 35 plus 40, and then when people do not need it, we have 0 and less. So the temperature is jumping into its extremes. That is the most harshest things of all. We don't need to have the very, very hot summer throughout whole summer, but sometimes only a couple of hours are enough for the whole yield to be ruined. And it is really hard to work with that and deal with that. Even though we have this a lot of challenges that you cannot work with, you can actually work with those challenges. At least we can try to mitigate its impact. What can we do in agriculture overall? We have to understand that agriculture is a production line, and as any kind of production, it also causes the emission. And we believe that those are around 20% of overall emissions as of now. Overall, we are evaluating that the overall area of agricultural territories in our planet is around 30%, but in Ukraine it's 70%. In some regions, we have 95% of the arable land. What is the amount of emissions? What is the amount of production there? So we have to decrease it. Even this one small tone is going to matter. As just one small ton of emissions that hasn't been produced, the mission that hasn't been completed is going to be the best for everyone. Everyone who would have this who will help you to save these big emissions. So, yes, we will have to remember that those things that have happened in the recent centuries, there has to be a connection between them. What actually connects the CO2 in our planet? What has been holding back the CO2 for a couple of million years from what we have now from our geological research and our logical research? That was nature. That was nature. That was plants. They were able to capture it all and we process it. So we have to think about that and we have to make sure that our agriculture would capture CO2. So we have to get adapted to that. I've used this word adapt to that because it makes slightly more sense for us. And speaking about the climate of overall for our planet Earth, the climate has been, you can read it out. So the definition about it, that's it about the solar radiation, that's about the air masses, the geology overall. But can you just imagine that, for example, in our planet, we would only have the sandy or the rocky landscape, and we have the sun radiation, and we're going to be having some kind of air masses. Will it be just the same without the greeneries? No, there will be a completely different climate. The climate of the Earth is as it is, just due to the collaboration of this biotical resources with their collaboration from the small microorganisms to the big elephants. And there is a lot of impact of human activity to that. So the weather in our houses, it actually depends on our collaboration as well. In what way we can decrease the overall scope and volumes of emission of the greenhouse gases. We need to develop the right biochemical processes, and those things when we have the most CO2 concentration, that one that have be the resources of the greenhouse gases of methane is. What are the processes that have been discussed? There's a lot of research on that, and I don't have a whole semester to read out those lectures, but those processes are already in place, the right biochemical processes, and we have to support them in a certain way. We will need to have the great plant coverage in order to prevent the emissions, in order to mitigate the emissions, in order to capture the CO2 in the right time. So we will not be able to use that in Ukraine for the capturing the CO2. Those machines are already available. They cost a lot, and they're definitely not something that we can afford. And we also should support the capturing the CO2 capturing processes. Okay, in our in our soils. And what is important for our soils is that they are rich in CO2, and we have to capture it in soils for definitely a couple of thousand years where our plants were capturing the CO2 in soil, and that is why we have those richness what we have. We have to keep in mind about the waters. We have rivers, we have swamps, we have water collectors. So the specific processes in the water basins, they can provide additional emissions of methane, but not the CO2 capturing. So we have to keep that in mind as well. Whatever there is, we're going to be very adaptive to that. We're trying to consider the real scenarios of climate change. It's definitely something that is going to be happening, and whatever we're trying to adapt or mitigate, the nature around us is changing, and the conditions of the agricultural production is changing as well, and we have to be adapted to that. And one of those solutions, in what way we can mitigate or we can decrease the emissions or we can capture the emissions in some way, is using the nature itself. So the nature would be able to do whatever the nature has been doing in the recent million of years. Given this opportunity for this nature to exist, because basically you can put it in the first place. You could speak about the preservation of nature as the first position, but we have the agricultural production. We're owning this territory, and we have to keep in mind that the water is important for our farm, and we have to manage the water resources in the right way. If we're speaking about the turf, if we're speaking about the swamp, those are the natural territory that protect water, and thus protecting and preserving waters for the full regions. Whether we will preserve those swampy areas, whether it has the opportunity to function and to work in the right way, whether there's turf lots also can the opportunity to exist. It's about our water that we will be able to drink, and our neighboring cities will be able to drink. So do we have any customers if there will be no drinking water at all? So those are very simple processes of using nature to filter the water, to filter the groundwaters, to be filtering the overall systems. With a certain planning, you can use that. Preservation the soil. Soil is our main jewel that we have, our main treasure. This is the main resource that we use in Ukraine. But we have to keep in mind that a soil is not just a substrate. It is a live organisms are full of microorganisms, full of the other organisms as well, and we have to work together to have the good rich yield in the end. Even the smallest part at your field of your natural plants in your field can be this bank of this live organism, so that your field would provide you with the good results, so that not that you will procure some kind of a foreign um, substance so that you will use it for restoring your soils as well. That seems like a very easy, a small forest, a small swamp, even a small group of trees, or even the line of the natural grass that was always there, the steep plants, that has something that really helped. That has something that really helped to improve the structure of the soil so that it would be in a normal way. So the natural resources would be preserved in the way so that soils would restore natural ways. And to decrease the emissions of the greenhouse gases as well, and so for the CO2 to be captured as well. Give the nature its opportunity to fulfill its own functions. The nature-oriented solutions, that's the new term that has been introduced for a couple of years ago, but this is the whole trend all over the world, the whole science around the world. We already have the standards. There is a full standard by the International Ecological Society that might have been our new state standards if we would only work on that. The standard is targeted, first of all, for all of us to be able to understand that what are the nature-oriented solutions, what are not. And the standard says that the nature-oriented solution, first of all, is trying to target some kind of a social reason. So it's not just about protecting nature itself, but just you shouldn't be feel that your field will be covered with fence and people will try to protect it from you. No, we're trying to resolve a social problem with help of nature, but not harming nature, but only helping the nature to complete its functions. So those nature-based solutions, they are directed for protection, balance, management, and restoration of the natural ecosystems. So that is why let us work together on finding the resolutions to these problems, and the nature-based solutions are going to help the agriculture, going to help the nature preservations, the water resources management systems that are also very important for Ukrainian agriculture. And we're definitely going to help our own health as well, because we all need clean air that is produced by the nature. We all need clean water. And in order for us to preserve our mental health, we also need to see nature all around us. So let us work together. Our project has just been launched. I do hope that next year, I hope in the very same year, maybe slightly later, we will get together again and we will give you the full list of the nature-based solutions that can be used in Ukraine, in agriculture, in forest, in forest breeding, and you will use our materials in your everyday activities for the best of all our country and our nature. Yes, thank you very much. It's important for us to hear that our work is going to be also used for your further own work as well. I think it's a good compliment for our experts. Of course, we will be tracking your work as well. And if you'll need some help, just let us know. I do believe that it's going to be very useful for all of us. And as far as our offers and our results, they have been good for you. Let us hope that they will be very useful for the agricultural sector overall. So we have to consider that. Maybe Larissa Starikov is going to help us to know whether we have been very useful for the agricultural production. Yes, thank you very much. I've noted down your standards and I've taken notes, and I will hope that we will have additional legislative documents provided. Today I wanted to talk to you about the good agricultural practices and common agricultural practice, proper agricultural practices, tools and implementation, and consensus practices. And sometimes, we are doubting of our producers, the producers of food, of how they have been producing their products. And I would like to show you about the mechanism and to talk a little bit about this topic, in what way we can provide the proper agricultural practices, and in what way we can then stimulate our producers to use the good practices, integral practices. So the proper agricultural practices, well, that basically we all have this legislation that requires the specific following of the legislation. At this very moment, the world, and legislation is always lagging behind the world development, we all know, but the world in the framework of the green transition has taken a different path, and has taken a different path of this, if we can call it, the soft power. So we are now developing the documents that are voluntary. And by the way, the standards of the WWF, they have been since the TBT agreement, they have started as voluntary things. Unfortunately, our standardizing system does not understand that. For 30 years, we have been reforming it, but still we don't have this joint understanding in what way the system should be reformed. So our standards are trying to be this can be state obligatory documents, and the Ministry of Economy, they're postponing it and saying we do not do that. No, no, no. So that is why we had the situation is very complicated for us. But the world is keep on moving in this direction. By introducing the standards, international standards of the proper practices, the practices that are fully voluntary on one hand, and on the other hand, if you will not consider following these practices, then you will not be included into the international markets, the markets that would be very interesting for the agricultural, for the producers. There are really harsh conditions, and the conditions that have been outlined in the proper practices. So one of the biggest achievements right now, you see the June 5th, 2021, when we've had this European document that has been published, which is titled the European Union Code of Conduct on Responsible Food Businesses and Marketing Practices. So basically, there is a directive as well on the proper marketing practices. Right now in our parliament, we have a very interesting process established when from one side, they are trying to take down all of the sense of this directive, and on the other hand, we as well as the supporters of the European integration processes were trying to get this law implemented and for it to be harmonized with European legislation as well. Still, this document, this code of conduct and responsible practices, it is as a motto that also has to be awarded, that this is an aspirational path towards sustainable food systems. So this document, you can see the link over here and you'll be able to click it later. This is the part of what is called the overall acquis EU. So we have the documents, regulations, and directives that are obligatory to follow, and there is an even bigger scope of documents that are included. That's in this overall documentary collection. So, for example, if you will need everything, so by the way, that's a very good system, the legislative system, so the IT legislative system, okay, but the database by the Verkhovna Rada, by the Parliament of Ukraine is not that bad. By the way, use it constantly because we have to check our legislation as it originally is. So if we would broaden it for those proper practices as well, it would have been a very effective resolution that would give a proper nationwide productivity. We have also joined these efforts on these cases. We have had this opportunity with the support of the Netherlands Embassy. We were able to work on providing the additional support, the Fair Food Ukraine assessment. So I would like to say that right now, when we're speaking about the basis of the food safety in the sector of the state control, I do not want to say that it's fully outdated, but I would just say that that's significantly synchronized with the European Union already. Right now, we have some tryouts to postpone those processes and to make amendments to those cases. That's something that does not correspond those practices. So yes, that's a very bad thing, but we are now figuring out to these main practices. And that's now, can you click on the Fair Food Ukraine? Yes. We have created this environment. We have created this system that is called the Fair Food Ukraine. That is the cluster of the integrity-based producers of these products. So you can see that there is, once again, the levels of integrity, and I will tell you a little bit more about what are those integrity levels and testimonies, and we can see the cluster community. Can you please click on the cluster community? Cluster, what does that mean? What is the differences between cluster and business association? Business association is about the very same equal members or like producers. What is cluster is about the union of partners. This is about the people who have the common goal. In this case, the common goal for us is integrity and to provide the food safety. We have five categories. We have five categories of members of our cluster. First of all, we're speaking about the operators of the food markets. Then we have international organizations on standards. I have already mentioned this idea that the world is now taking this path of introducing the proper practices and standards. And I've already understood that our system has been for under the reform for 30 years. And we had this opportunity with the donor support. We have the USAID project for this project. We had this opportunity to create this concept, and by the way, Natalia was the participant in this process. We had this opportunity to create this kind of association based on self-regulation. But unfortunately, as it always goes, the project has ended, everything has ended, and our associations, they used to be very enthusiastic about that when the project was ongoing, but the project has ended. They haven't completed this case. And by the way, they should have lost it. So by the way, this is how our cluster has been organized from that project. But still, businesses cannot wait. Businesses should go to the international market. So that is why we are engaging businesses in our cluster as well. So that is why we have invited the standardizing and certifying organization to our workplace as well. We do hope that that will definitely improve the position of Ukrainian businesses. Trainers, consultants, and auditors were also the members of our cluster. We already said that you can either hire a professional who's going to be responsible for that as an amateur, but you can already use this the professionals. As I've already said, no one makes their own shirts right now. You are going to the shops and buying it. The same thing, you should not prepare your own enterprise for the state checkout, even though you have to do that. You should not just, you have to just procure the needed software, the good product of the good quality, and the market. So that is why we're building right now this market for trainers, consultants on getting the businesses prepared to follow all of those requirements of the legislations. The auditors can always say that we can give it a label that, I am doing all of the things, but there has to be the trust towards the certification and toward the auditing reports. Financial institutions, we understand that following the main conditions by the businesses, especially right now with the Green Deal, this topic is very acute right now. The businesses, they understand that in Ukraine, we don't have it in our national financial system. We don't have this additional financial sources that would leave the business the opportunity to follow all of the conditions. Just a very banal example, the HASP. We have approved the legislation on introducing the HASP norms, and this was very important. That's really good. And maybe some people can do something with their operational expenses, but there are, for example, requirements for the places, and you cannot rebuild your premise with your own money. You will need to have an additional resource for financial support to follow those conditions. Unfortunately, we do not have that. We have been raising these questions on a regular basis. We have been speaking about it quite regularly. And the informational spaces. Thank you very much for inviting us again to this place. Thank you very much for showing us that the informational platforms are very important for it to be prosperous. Can I get back to my presentation, please? So yes, the good and proper agricultural practices. So this is something that we've done this year as well. On the 31st of August, we presented those practices, and it's very good that this year has turned out to be very productive. By the way, I have heard about this roadmap about the very first times, and I do believe that this is the coolest thing. I have never seen that on the state level as we've had it on the level. What is needed? We need to have this overall position, and here we have shown it quite clearly. We have shown all of the rails that we already have. Yes, I would like to get to the next slide, and I would like to also congratulate all of us with all of the successes that the year 2021 has brought to us. So right now in year 2021, and we're unfortunately only with the donor support, not with the help of the national resources, but we have had a lot of achievements already. And right now I would like to cite that we have spoken about the step-by-step movement. What are the steps that we have to use as well? What are the steps that we have to do for us to be this integral producers that is supporting these fair practices? First of all, getting ready for the state checks. You will have additional times for presentation. You will then click to this pictures and you will be able to see all of those links and you'll be able to note it, to see that. I have already spoken about our Fair Food Ukraine organizations. We have prepared our training organization that has been supported by our IT tool, but still I would like to ask you to click on this link still, if it is possible. Declaring on the overall declaring. In our cluster, we have 4 levels of your declaration of your fairness, So, fairness and being integral policies are the lyrical notion, but we have provided it with a very precise sense. So our integrity is about being ready for the producers, to being ready to follow the national legislation conditions, and the desire from the producer to follow all of the conditions to all of those international standards that currently exist in the overall safety of the products. The level of your testimonies to your integrity level. We have 4 levels of that. The first level would be the basic beginner level. So this is the getting prepared to the state checks with the support of all of those trainers that we can provide you with, that one that we have prepared and even provided you the certificates when they completed their home tasks and when they have shown that there is something that they received of that. Can I ask you to go lower with that? Yes. The level of declaring, okay, the integrity testimonies as well. As I have already said, that our legislation has been harmonized with European legislation. And in the European legislation, we have the checks and the risk-oriented controls that have already been provided to our checks. So in this case, here, those are the main directions of our checks and our control. We have a very specific conditions that have been outlined that the businesses have to follow. Those are all of the directions of your integrity. The first of them is the sanitary and epidemical prosperity. So right now we know we have some moratorium with that, but this is something that has to be checked all the time. The plant protection, the quarantining, the quarantines, the hospital, all of that, there has to be this horizontal directions and horizontal checks that you will have to fulfill. The main rights of declarations that has been said, in what way it has been declared and how you can declare your integrity. You can open your Google form and your producer should only answer a couple of the questions and thus declaring your integrity and your fairness. Declaration is voluntary for you to do or not to do, whether you've done it or not, it's up to you, but still, if it's quite clear that we have some sanctions, if we have this sanction list there as well, if you know that something has been declared in not the best way, then we can include it into the sanction list. And then in order to be integral again, you have to have some time, you will have to have some time as well. So basically, you're not going to be included into this list later on. So, okay, can we get back to that? Yes, thank you. Step number 1, getting ready to the state inspection. You can go through the training, you can declare your integrity and fairness that you're ready for the state inspection. Step number 2, going through the state inspection. As the result of going through the state inspection, the business will receive an act that is going to be signed by both the inspector and the business's representative, where everything's going to be mentioned. That's a separate story. When you have received this positive act, you can also declare it as well. But as well, understanding that our sector and the sector of the state control is still slightly corrupted, sometimes not slightly corrupted. So it's not that easy to declare your positive act. That's not enough. You can declare the positive act only when you have gone through this training. At least this is going to be the guarantee that you've got ready to this inspection in some way. So declaring the positive act of the state inspection completed. The third step would be getting ready to certification. So this is the minimum. This is the minimum requirement. The maximum requirements, the requirements that have been already proposed by the market, is this about the second level of declaration. This is the step number 3, getting ready for the certifications. I'm not going to be showing it to you because basically we have tried to create the biggest list of standards, and your standards is going to be included into our standards as well. The one that we are using to prove our integrity as well. We have 27 standards in our food safety. We don't have the social responsibility here, and we would really be happy if you will give us the list of those standards as well, because we haven't been really aware of those standards yet. So those are the standards of basically the compliance awareness as well, and getting certified according to the international standards. And Natalia will tell us about that. And Natalia is our leader of movement of the Stop Fake Certificate movement, because we have seen people who really love to take the international certificates from the internet and to print it at your own color printers. So yes, this is our case of our Stop Fake Certificate campaign, and this is about our sanction list. So we have a lot of tools. We have a lot of tools available for that. You can see the Fair Food Ukraine, ffu.net.ua. You can all take a look at that. So thank you very much for your attention. All the best for our new year, and let us have the best inspiration for the next years to come. Yes, thank you, Larissa. We're really out of schedule. The only thing for us that is good that we have planned a lot of time for discussion, but discussion is happening at the same time for all of us. But we still have 2 more presentations. Who was supposed to be there in our presentation? Who do we have online? We have Sophia online and Anastasia online. So we have Anastasia Bilic online with us. 2 representatives of Arnica. They even have been to the climate forum as well, and they have presented their experience there as well. It's just that I haven't understood it from those posts on Facebook. What was that they presented? Maybe Anastasia will tell us a little bit more. So Anastasia, are you with us? Hello? Hello, Anastasia. Yes, hello. Yes, this is Anastasia from Arnica speaking. I haven't been there connected. Can you hear me right now? Can you hear me well? Yes, we can hear you and see you well. Okay, good day, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you very much for being the part of this active discussion, and thank you very much for raising this topic of adopting the new Green Deal. It's important. Thank you very much for voicing it out, because the climate agenda has become really popular all over the world, and it has been heard from all of the parties and from all of the businesses that we have collaborated, and it has been very, very relevant overall. I will explain you why. We are the company that works in the organic agriculture, and our decision has been made since 2012. Up till since then, we were able to step by step get overall more than 15,000 hectares to the organic technologies. We are the companies, as Lyudmila Starikova has said, who understands the integrity issues. We understand how relevant it is for Ukraine and for the trust of the certification. We are the company that has been certified according to the international standards, and we have been certified according to the international standards of organic production. And the issue of climate for us is important, even though we are the company that doesn't use the chemical production that has been, even in the previous evaluation, is not the company that as the emittent of the CO2 or any other greenhouse emissions, but we are still have concluded the issues of sustainability for us. And this question has been even more relevant for us because the CO2, because right now we have this opportunity to change the CO2 to an additional asset for the company. Because how it works in our system, in our systems of thoughts and in our systems of business making. The main driver for us to switch to the sustainable agricultural practices was that the products that are and the agricultural products that include the CO2 emission, they are more attractive at the market and even at the market of the commodity markets. So those companies, those partners that we are working with, whether they are the companies from the European Union or from the US or from Japan, they're starting to be interested in a wide way of what we are producing, whether we produce our products and certify it additionally as the product that has certain positive balance with the CO2 emission. That was something that actually made us dig deeper to this topic just for us to understand whether they were the CO2 emittents or whether we are the company that captures the CO2 in the soils and that it can receive some benefits from that as well. The next moment with this need, we've had additional need for us as well to research our CO2 emission levels. And in the framework of that, we have started the project with the main task of it to verify our level of our CO2 emissions and the sequestered CO2 overall. Based on the result of this evaluation, there has been a very investment dense. We've understood that arnica as agricultural production can capture more CO2 than we emit. That basically given us the opportunity. Due to that, we were able to do that due to those practices that we have established, because we have started to work with organic technologies, with the help of the new cultures, with the help of the with a bigger amount of the soil coverage, with because we haven't emitted the CO2 by the mineral fertilizers, and when we haven't used the chemical fertilizers, we've had this opportunity of creating this additional carbon density in soils. And that is what's given us the second driver. The second driver that's basically forces us to complete this project and to verify it correspondingly, to invite the international auditors as well, and to receive some carbon credits, because the carbon credits, just the way as 1 ton of wheat that is right now is being traded at the exchange or in partnership with other countries, this is an asset that has a specific price, and the very same, the CO2 ton and the ton of wheat has an important cost, important value as well. So that is why we're really interested in trying to resolve certain climate problems that are obvious climate problems that are obvious for all of our market players, for agricultural players as well. We understand that we're able to improve our market positions with that through the idea that we will have additional carbon labeling. We will be able to improve our market position because we will have the partners that have declared the very same carbon less and carbon neutral plans as our company as well. And we are improving our market positions through becoming the partners to a completely different supply chains as well. There are the numbers of companies that we have been working for the longest period of time already, the one that hasn't switched to the sustainable practices, who do not have their demand for have the carbon labeling at their final product, so they haven't declared not a single strategies or goals in their ESG or decarbonization strategies. But we have a number of partners from the European Union who have declared it openly already, not just on the level, some kind of the ethical principles or declarations, but they're declaring it with their actions, saying that they only want to work with those partners who have been making and have been active in the decarbonization projects as well, who have been certifying their CO2 impact and CO2 emission in a correspondent way. So I do believe that agricultural sector at this very moment, as it has been already approved by the European Union, and speaking about the Ukrainian producers as well, right now we have more opportunities on this Green Deal than we have threats or potential threats to that. I do understand that the transition to the modernizing practices that will help us to decrease the CO2 emission, or that will help us to decrease the um, methane emission, that is very costly. But to start this very journey of decarbonization, we have to make the first step as well. We have to understand what is your system, that what is the framework that you are, what place you're having on your CO2 emission framework. And then you will have to have the next solutions of what are the agricultural practices you're about to use, what kind of practices on processing or logistics you're going to be using, depending on how many scopes you would like to include into this assessment, and to search for the partners that would like to work with your product. There is more and more of those partners appearing from the European Union, and to find the partners as well, to find the partners that will support you on this journey on the decarbonization. I'm mostly speaking about the partners from financial point of view, from the banking sector, because the path of decarbonization is going to be supported by certain costs and expenses from your part, and you will be able to compensate it with the green financial support that are offered right now by multiple financial institutions. I do believe that the path of decarbonization and the path of the green or greenization of the companies, if we can put it this way, so that is something that is inevitable right now. And but unlike the metallurgy, unlike the cement sector, unlike the aluminum production, right now the agriculture does not have, for example, the CBAM certificates that will be binding or that will be preventing the product from importing. So right now we have this important opportunity for all of us to do some new, to do some projects, to perform some project with decarbonization, to complete those projects and to receive the certain benefits of that. We can either go to the markets, to the exchange with our CO2 certificates, or we can become partners with the representatives of European Union, with our partners from the European Union that are declaring the very same goals. And for us, the decarbonization project has turned to be an even broader strategy that we have decided to establish in our company. It's starting out the work of our company in the framework of ESG strategy. Why it was important for us? Because the decarbonization is an important, inevitable component of this ESG component, so the environment component. And in the framework of this environment components, there's a lot of things that we have done already, not just mentioning the decarbonizations. We're working a lot in the biodiversity measures. We are having a lot of measures to preserve our water resources and to support the ecosystem that is around our fields and our landlots. And we are trying to support our organic production as well. And the next component in ESG is about the social policy and governance in the company. Why the ESG principles are becoming important for us. And I do believe it's very important, and we have to talk about that in the new Green Deal and outside of the new Green Deal, because the ESG components are very important in the context of receiving additional green finances. More and more financial institutions would like to see Ukrainian companies that are declaring their sustainable practices, that are declaring their social policies openings, that are doing some really good steps, that are making some really good steps on in the path of preserving the climate innovation, providing the good climate ways of working with your producers as well. So that is why I do believe that the overall development path, if we speak about the agricultural sector in the new Green Deal and in the Green Deal in Ukraine, we will have the three main players here. First of all, we'll have these pioneers, those pioneering companies the one that have been switching to the decarbonization projects, that one that have already joined the project of sustainable development, the one that have been motivated by their own enthusiasm when and through tries out and failures. Why failures? Because there's not a clear methodology. There's not a clearly identified methodologies of identifying the CO2. So basically, there's not right now that is something that currently uh, that is right now basically exists at the voluntary basis. So there's no compulsory certification. The second moment would be there would be the second companies, the companies that have been through the decarbonization already, the one that have started using the other practices as well. So those are the companies, how it happened to Arnica and how did it happen to other companies, what were the systems that we've used to become partners, who we have contacted, and how you can receive some payments. It's actually from paying your carbon credits, or how can you be doing that inside of the certain framework or outside of certain sector. The third type of company is the one that are going to be negatively motivated by the regulators. So it's either the state regulators, or they will be maybe motivated by sanctions, or whether they will be motivated by the idea that, the European Union is going to introduce the carbon tax for the agricultural products as well. Or, for example, for the framework for, they will introduce some new norms for Germany as well, which is one of our main importers. So I do believe right now, while we still have time, while we still have this opportunity, we should not be afraid to be the pioneers. But in the same time, we need to have it for our state and for our legislators to create the right existing field so that the market would function, the carbon market would function. So we should not just go through the sanctions and fines to start with, but to take the path of creating some motivational tools. For example, the decreasing the auditing the interest in loans for the modernization projects. If we've had the very same interest for the modernization project, I think that there will be multiple enterprises who would really be happier to conduct the projects on modernization to preserve the environment and to preserve the ecosystems around them. And also, there might be some introductions of the ESG obligations or ESG bonds as well. We can review some other compensational and incentive mechanisms that will stimulate but not punish, as we used to do that, that we will stimulate the switch to the practices that have been presupposed um, by the businesses. So I would like to ask the businesses to consider the green course as an opportunity, to Green Deal as an opportunity, but not forget about those risks that might be connected to the idea that you will remember it the longest possible way, that the Green Deal is already available. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Anastasia. Thank you very much. And that gives me a lot of optimism as well, because from what that we have outlined as our vision, as our office, it turns out that we already have the people who have been doing that. That was the reality in our country. That is something that makes us really optimistic. We understand that we are all just the pioneers in that, but let us hope that, the pioneers, the first cohort and the second cohort will follow. And there will be no need for the state to force the other actors to follow some new steps or new norms. Okay, thank you very much. And I would like to pass the floor to our final speaker today, to our colleagues, Sofia Kayati from the European Environmental Bureau. And I do believe that after what Anastasia has said, it would be very interesting to learn what are the problems for the European Union in this path from farm to fork. And I think that We really wanted Sophia to be the last our presenter because we know that Sophia might not be that in depth aware of the situation with Ukraine, but now she had this opportunity to take an overview of the Ukrainian situation overall. So, Sophia, I do hope that you will be able to respond maybe to some of the issues or problems that you have heard from Ukrainian speakers, and maybe you would also will give us some advice. So that would be even more informative for us. But please, the floor is yours, please.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak at this event today. And I've really enjoyed the discussion so far. I'm quickly going to share my screen because I've prepared a little presentation. Let me know if you can see it. Up. Well, I'm just going to start like this. Yeah. All right. So I wanted to talk today about some of the obstacles and challenges that we see in the transition towards moving to more sustainable farming and agriculture, and also to offer some suggestions and recommendations how we can remove them on the path from farm to fork, and also to give a bit more of a European perspective on this. And as you mentioned, yeah, offer maybe some advice. So as you all know, the European Green Deal provides the framework for a transition towards sustainability for much of the European Union's economy. And under the umbrella of the European Green Deal, we have these key agricultural targets that we want to achieve by 2030, according to the Farm to Fork strategy and the biodiversity strategy, which you can see on the left-hand side of the slide here. When it comes to agriculture, it really plays a big role in achieving this economy-wide objectives. However, if we really want to change agriculture, or when it comes to changing agriculture, the job is primarily left to the Common Agricultural Policy, the CAP, which is at the moment, introduced in a new way. And in theory, this new CAP, which will enter into force in 2023, should allow for a greener and also a fairer agricultural policy across European countries. However, as we see it now and as it stands now, it shows too little ambitions to address the urgent issues of climate change and biodiversity loss. And it rather chooses the business as usual approach. So we have this common agricultural policy, the two pillars, and what is new this time is the so-called eco schemes, which I will touch upon. So as where we are at the moment is that the current intensive model of food production is wreaking havoc for the environment. It cannot be sustained over the long term, and many expectations for a greener CAP have been pinned on the so-called eco schemes. It's a new form of direct payments for environmentally friendly farming. They are fully funded by the European Union, and they take the form of yearly payments to farmers who basically can enroll voluntarily. Member states are in principle planning to spend at least 25% of direct payments on eco schemes. And the real aim behind these eco schemes is to reward those farmers who chose to go one step further and manage land in a nature and climate friendly way. In our most recent report, however, that looked at these new eco schemes, that we conducted together with BirdLife and WWF, we assessed basically 166 eco schemes from across 21 European countries, and we looked at the strategic plans in the countries and wanted really to find out, okay, what is the situation on the ground? How is the future CAP really going to be implemented in those countries? And what we found is that the three most common eco schemes are on management and the creation of landscape features. The second most common one is on extensive grassland management, and the third one on the use of cover and catch crops. What is quite problematic, though, is that member states' proposed eco schemes will fall short of expectations. So while there are several well-designed schemes, for example, on Space for Nature, they are often very, the payment levels are not really sufficient, and there's just not enough budget to support the schemes. Member states usually take a piecemeal approach. There's very few multi-dimensional eco schemes. Instead, we see a vast majority of eco schemes that are designed for paying for a single type of interventions, which is not as effective as having multiple eco schemes. Also, conditionality and greening are brought into eco schemes a lot, which basically means that conditionality standards are being implemented quite weakly by member states, and some basic farming practices like catch crops, for example, are instead being proposed as eco schemes. So this could absorb a huge share of the budget for eco schemes and at the end deliver little added value. There's several eco schemes which are focusing only on techno fixes, and overall we think that the key environmental pressures remain unaddressed. So one or a couple of the worst examples that we found in this assessment were that the eco schemes on precision farming, with basically no benchmarks or requirements for actual input reductions. We had eco schemes for no-till farming without limits on herbicides, eco schemes that really only looked at end-of-pipe solutions for livestock, which is really not tackling the underlying drivers of pollution or excessive antimicrobial use. We had eco schemes for crop diversification, so greening type eco schemes, which don't really have any environmental benefits. Then we saw examples of grassland schemes without the right livestock density. So overall, a lot of schemes were actually not that well designed, which brings me to my next point. What are our recommendations for those eco schemes, and how could member states and also the Commission make sure that eco schemes really deliver on the European Green Deal? Well, first of all, pay for practices that support and contribute to a holistic transition towards more sustainable farming systems, and not only for marginal improvements. Second of all, do not pay for basic farming practices which are already common, which should already be mandatory, which are already mandatory in laws, or which have unclear or contested environmental benefits. Third of all, set clear baselines and targets in eco schemes, targeting efficiency improvements and reduction in inputs. So eco schemes should always have a clear intervention logic and really should be designed to achieve measurable improvements. The fourth principle is the do no harm principle. So eco schemes must never incentivize practices which could cause negative environmental impacts, or basically having no environmental trade-offs. And also make sure to that the payment level and the expected environmental benefits are proportional. So the overall suggestion is really to focus on system-based and agroecological approaches, so including, among others, conservation agriculture, circular agriculture, agroforestry, organic farming. So there's a lot of concepts out there. We just need to make sure that the impact is on multiple sustainability objectives. So what I really want you to take away is that we need a holistic diagnosis of the problems that we are facing at the moment, but also holistic solutions at the end are really crucial. We can't really afford at the moment to create new problems or worsen existing problems while tackling only one single environmental dimension. And that is also true in terms how we produce. So while, for example, precision farming make farms more efficient, it won't solve soil degradation or biodiversity loss. For soils, for example, we need to bring back organic matter to the land, crop rotations, strongly limit or eliminate synthetic inputs. For biodiversity, we need more diverse landscapes, smaller parcels, diverse crops. So the solutions are already there. We just need to understand that as soon as you look at the multitude of environmental and social challenges facing the agricultural sector, you are also forced to look at more holistic solutions and not only on technological solutions. So that was it from my side. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope I could contribute a little bit. I'm gonna stop sharing.
Дякую, пані Софія.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sophia. That was all in the overall direction of our today's conversation. And it actually has proven our conclusions as well to what you have said. Because, you know, this is something that also inspires us for the further development of those activities and the further development of this direction. So that was the final presentation for us today, because we have noted down some of the issues and some of the questions as we go, but there are some other questions that we still have open questions. So I would like to ask all our participants right now, if you have any questions that you would like to discuss in our topic, what should we do? What should be the next steps for us to take? The publication is available, the publication, the roadmaps with all of our drawings will be sent to the corresponding ministries. That's for sure. That's something that is definitely happening. And this is going to be a Christmas present for all of them. And we will ask them to respond to these ideas. That's clear for what we're going to be doing. But speaking about our audience right now, in our live audience right now, in our online audience, other than things that haven't been clarified, do you have any questions that you would like to cover, or do you have any questions that you still would like to ask? Yes, I think that not that much about a question that I have, but maybe I would like to have a comment and to highlight that again, that it's very good that we have discussed it again for the both production and consumption. And as our speakers have already said, when we're speaking about the big producers, they are informed. And you know, they are informed and they are running to get more income. And you know that this is mostly for them, that the legal aspects for them are very important as well, and we have to pressure the ecological and environmental aspects for them as well. But speaking about this small producers, and Olga Ignatenko has mentioned that as well, that it's important to inform them, because sometimes they're not aware what alternatives are, and they might be doing something wrong just because they were doing that all the time and they don't know there are alternative things available. And Tamara has said it in the right way, that throughout this year we had these bulletins and newsletters that the Green Dossier has prepared with experts, and that have explained what other practices available there. What should we consider for small producers and for the big producers as well? And speaking about the consumers as well, individual consumers, you might be located in Ukraine or in the European Union countries, and we have some people who believe that they're saving the planet, they're sorting the waste, for example, and there are eating with the minimum of meat in their diets, but to reduce the consumption of the avocados. That was something that wasn't that obvious, that by eating less avocados, you can actually decrease the harm for other countries and territories. And at the same time, that was very interesting for me to read out the information in this newsletters because, for example, how to use the leftovers of your coffee. So you're drinking coffee at all. So basically, if it's going to be in the landfill, that it has a negative effect to the environment. So you have to think about additional processing of the leftovers of the grounded coffee. So there has to be an approach to that. What can be the approach for both, not just the producers, but for the consumers as well? So we have to work on that. There has been a lot of things that have been done already, but we have to consider this direction and we have to implement it fully. Thank you. Yes, I have a couple of things that I wanted to add up. Yes, thank you for that comment. So, by the way, our grain coffee has been reprocessed already. We have an enterprise that has been doing that in Ukraine already. Like, I'm sorry. So, yeah, so basically, yes, we have this complex approach that is something that is needed. You know, the holistic approach is something that is needed. That's something that can improve our nutrition and our food system. Right now, the food system is broken, but we have to turn it into functioning. So, what Nadia has said, so we have to get back to the local food systems. That's the first thing that works. It increases the food safety. It stimulates the farmers to produce better products because their products are going to be eaten by their neighbors. So basically, they can see what is the effect of their production for the local ecosystem and social environment, and they can give you feedback directly. This is the best approach. The best approach that is definitely going to influence overall impact and can conclude will make the overall schemes transparent and effective. And yes, it will work, but if I may, about the meat consumption, that was the question from Maria. That was a very important question as well. Why should we start this discussion overall and engage all of the stakeholders? Because there's a lot of questions that have multiple answers. And we have to find the solution that will be meeting the interest and will be meeting the demand of all of the stakeholders. Then this resolution will work. And speaking about the production and consumption of meat, yes, we have a lower level of consumption of meat in our country, but we have real lots of poultry complexes that has been really bad. But yes, they don't use the red meat, but that is a problem that exists. And the problem of eating meat is first of all about, again, providing the additional education so you could actually choose. We have these cases, even how the awareness changes some kind of the habits that people have. So for example, like the no no antibiotics meat. So they've started to produce this meat, and the other producers have already been following that. So these schemes, they work like that. So you have to take all of the systems to that and reform it. So this is something that has already been happening, and we have this answer for the products of the we have our own producers already, the alternative producers, they have already represented in all of the supermarkets. So the things are changing right now. So why do we need that? We need that to provide those things that are going to have the better effect for the nature and for the society. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I would like to ask a couple of the questions from the chat because we've had a very interesting questions and a lot of discussions going on in the chat as well on different issues. But one of the questions that have been asked, and there was a question by Mykola, so was like, have you asked the farmers, are they ready to get onto the green rails? That was one of the questions. The other question was, what should we do so that we would get that into practice, so that we would get to those practices in of the sustainable development and sustainable production? What should we do with that? You know, as a representative of the agriculture sector, I want to say that no, they're not ready. And no, I represent the agricultural center of Ukraine, and basically, you know that those are the mid-range farms that are very sustainable, that are very self-reliant, and basically they are ready for eating out the ready-made products. If it's all going to be implemented into some seeds already, the seeds will already have some moments of protecting climate protection. So have a special introducing some kind of measures specifically. They will not do that. It will be really hard to actually turn them to the needs to do that. Even though they all are very progressive right now, and they're, uh, but right now we see the meat enterprises will also join that when they will have to be there, when they will be forced to introduce that. If they will eat it out from a different plant, from a different dish, everything will be okay. So yes, I would like to get back to what Anastasia Village have said, is that basically all of those myths, they will be in this category 3 by them, by her division, or we have to get some people, pushed into that. Okay, but we're going to have some the pioneers as well, and I do believe that there are people who are going to be going through that as well. Yes, so Mikimenko Natalia, the members of the public board in the state food service. So the question was like this, and the thought is like this, that basically until we will have the prohibition of the slaughter of the cattle in your household, then it's basically it would not be able to comment about what is the overall consumption of meat. For example, I don't buy meat a lot, but for example, but I have my own meat product. I can eat all my own meat that I breed as well. Then the antibiotics resistance as well. And so that's a very important issue right now because we have a lot of changes happening, and Ukraine is not ready for that. Morally and physically, we're not ready for that. We have the lack of inspectors in Ukraine that would control it all. We have a lot of questions that haven't been closed already, but it doesn't mean we're not working on that. But when we're speaking about the small producers, and we have this micro businesses, we have this big agricultural holdings. And if agricultural holdings, then they're going to be meeting the international needs as well. But if we're speaking about the meat ones who are selling in Ukraine with all of those surpluses and so charges by the supermarkets, our market is that violent toward our producers that it doesn't work because the people will say that yes, you are selling it in the best of way, but we're not capable of following that because even if I will do the coolest product in Ukraine, but it's not going to be the export oriented, then basically the network of the chains of supermarkets, they will not give me the opportunity to earn something with this product. So let us get basically for those are the smallest people who have to build up their own local products. So when you produce it and it has to be eaten somewhere there. So this is something that I've seen because we're going to be the leaders in this product because the small producers, they don't have a lots of products to add up their products somewhere else, but they're not aware. They don't know the changes for the legislation that has happened. Then we don't have basically a lot of things for that. So it was very important for us to have no carbon track as well because so that the cars would not go far away. So right now when we have the flour from Kharkiv to Kirovohrad and then the bread is going to be baked there and then you're going to be selling to Poltava. So if we will not locally produce and consume our products, then we will not be able to know what is the real impact. And we don't have the controls on that. The state food service right now cannot force, for example, the very same household slaughter of the cattle cannot be prohibited right now, but there is no local small slaughterhouses when you can implement that. So basically, we're going to be impacting this micro producers, and we're going to be only empowering the big industrial enterprises. Just a small remark and just a small task for us to cover as well. Yes, thank you very much for this small task. We will try to find the resolution for that. You would like to comment? Yes, Nadia, who will be the first to comment? Yes, okay. So as far as I remember, that was the question as well. We haven't fully answered about the availability of the products as well. And the meat was here just an example as one of the products with a big track, for example, that might be even bigger for the avocado, depending on where the avocado comes from. So my colleagues have already outlined that we have had the key important moment that the elements of availability, that having this product of with like avoiding the mediators, avoiding the intermediaries, so checking shortening down the overall supply chains, so consuming locally. And we have to understand that the price is not just a result of the market mechanism, it is a result of the certain state policies as well and regulation mechanism as well. So what do we know most? The state supports the state policies for the support of farmers or consumers, because they are considered to be the most vulnerable groups of the populations, and the availability of products for them is something that is important for us. And trying to implement it in our roadmap, because we have seen that in our roadmap as well. And thank you very much for supporting us with that answer. I hope I've answered your questions in a way. Yes, I just wanted to thank once again for this good roadmap and the documents that I'm definitely going to read. And I think that the next step that is going to be very important for all of us is to continue this dialogue. Because if we did not have the dialogue between all of those parts of the processes of this really complex food system, then it will be very hard for us to introduce that as well. And wanted to have this very brief comment on in the final presentation, we have seen that the eco schemes, they have a lot of problems as well. And our farmers, our meat farmers and small farmers, that's really would like to have a ready-made peel as well, because it will be easier for them to have the eco schemes. They see that the ready-made peel, and this in our conditions, it is really hard for us to do that, because the farm has the local conditions, and all of those practices, they have to be assessed with a very specific example. They might be different depending on the location of the field as well. So this is the challenge that the European Union has faced, as we have seen that there are some of the resolutions that have been classified as better and worth, but there sometimes might not be meet the real requirements. And there's a lot of important things that we have to consider as well. Like, yes, the farmers would like to have the simple resolution, but we will not have it. If we will have this holistic approach, then we will not be able to provide it. So this element of education and awareness is very important, or for the future for us not to get trapped with these simple decisions like let us start doing organic or let us go no-till, and that will be the main decision for it all, or let us pay money for that. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your point of view. We've had a comment from Larissa, and then we pass the floor to you as well. You know, right now we're talking about it all, but I still wanted to mention yet another moment and yet another chronicle moment for us, because we have discussed the dotation and support for that. And by the way, that we know that the COVID has now pushed our state to to support this not just the producers, as we've had to have the producers everything, and we have to support the producers, but to subsidize it from the side of the market, from the side of the customer, who can spend their money as they want to. But our state policy, even from the side of the producer at this very moment, is disbalanced, is fully disbalanced with what the Green Deal is supposed to do. Our state gives $1 billion for procuring the new agricultural machinery, and it is very good that we have the change of the equipment as well, but the dysfunction of the banking system to invest and to subsidize and to incentivize the good producers. Even those credits 579, everyone likes this program, everyone is trying to get included into these programs to get only those loans. But by the National Bank, that is basically painting this rate on the paper, why this money are being delegated from the state and why we cannot use it for the social goals, why the national financial system itself, again, throughout the 30 years, cannot get to the normal rates. People say that risks are high, but we're trying to decrease those risks as well. And this is one of the mechanisms as well. And unfortunately, that those mechanisms that do not work, and we have to draw attention to that as well. Yes, we will draw the attention to that. Yes, of course. Yes, I see that you have the microphone, please. Yes, speaking about the policies of the financial support, yes, that is an important tool for that. And it's very good that the National Bank has already been taking care about that. But we have to add up a little bit of expert points of view to that. We will need to have additional expert evaluations to what risks are good, what risks are high, what risks are low, so that we would incentivize the businesses with low risks. It's a very good that National Bank has got up to that, and that is very cool. Among the European countries, we are the best in this. National banks, very good. The one thing that I wanted to ask as well, wanted to add up to what has been said. Yes, the agroecology is a very local thing, and we have to continue that, and we have to consider the local condition. And that is why it is important for us to work not only on the level of the state, but on the level of the local planning as well, so that it would be harmonized between all of the people and it would be working for all of us. So I do believe that it will be also the recommendation for all of us, and I do hope that it will be presented for everyone, because we have a lot of people who they are also suffering. That doesn't work as it should be, and they don't have additional financial support. Nothing is being done. So basically, all of the resources are bad, and we can see that the fields are bad. So it doesn't work like that. So everything is bad right now. So we have to start working on that, and we have to addressing that as it is. So this is the first step that can be done, to give it to the local communities, so the local communities would know that that is possible, and then see how it will work out, whether it will be possible. Because I have already seen that we have a very quick feedback and unexpected feedback from my side, because the community also want to see the river clean. They want to see the tourists coming to them, and so that the farmers would be also into that, so that there will be choosing it because they are living there. They have to be responsible for that as well.
Ну, давай. Да.
Yes, hello. I have a question. I have a question just to continue on this topic that we have had started on the farmers, because basically all of this discussion for the climate change, all of this discussion of this climate change and green change is being made only for this 20, 30 people in Ukraine. So there's a lot of cases, maybe up to 50 people who are discussing it. You know, we don't have to work with farmers, because I have talked to farmers, they've only have heard about that, and they have a very bad idea of what we're talking about, as it used to be about the land market. A year ago, that was an idea that would go, everyone is going to be procuring this land. So basically, the same idea is about the Green Deal as well right now. So the farmers are considering this information that they have heard, and that they have seen, not directly from the professionals, but some kind of a different sources. And this is the biggest problem, because I've talked to the farmers, and they're not really positively thinking about that, because now they are not able to use certain herbicides, for example, but they are ready to find the solutions for that, but technologically they cannot see the solutions to that. What was going to be happening with our farmers, because I have spoken to farmers who have 1,000 hectares, 2,000 hectares, the successful farmers, they said, let us discuss it after 2030 or 2040. Because I would like to give you a very good example, in my opinion. This is the introduction of the organic production, when in 3-4 years we were able to increase the overall amount of lands by 2, when there was a massive seminars and massive explanations to the farmers on standards, on technologies, and farmers, they have understood it and started working with that. So that was a good example of introducing the specific technologies. It has been supported by non-state money. That was the Swiss supported that. But right now, most of the farmers, they have a clear understanding of what organic production is. They know what that is. They understand what it is and have a clear vision to that. And someone works with that and someone does not. So this is an example of this case. So why can't we start working with the environment of the farmers, to work with the ready-made cases, to work with the explanation, to broader the biggest cases, the biggest meetings in the local centers. And basically, so that was an important, so that people would not be afraid that the land and so basically that there is the discussion between the small amount of places, but that we don't have this final approach to the farmers, that they're harsh, they're practical, they're going to give a very harsh questions to the representatives of the government, to the experts, but they will definitely give us the opportunity to start certain point of view and to exchange these ideas. Speaking on this, whether the community is going to be supporting the development of the rivers and will improve it, I will disappoint you with that, because we have seen how the lakes have been provided to the community, they have been provided to the rented, they have been used for fish breeding with violations of all of the norms. And what I have seen as a couple of examples, there's no control systems in communities. They want money. They are going to violate some ecological norms even. So we do not have this high level of culture for that, and we have to shape it. The event was very cool. It's a pleasure for me to be there, but this question of promoting it among the farmers, there's something that we have to discuss and plan. Yes, I understand that it's a complex idea. I really would like to learn from your point of view how we're going to do that together, because I'm also ready to participate in that. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mikola. I do hope that we will be able to do that together with all of us. So what I have understood from your point of view, that you know it better than we do about how it should be done. Let us get together to work together so that we are ready to go to farmers, to address, to discuss it, to talk to them, to explain it to them. We're already sending our bulletin, our newsletter. We're trying to make it as simple as possible, trying to make it clearer so that the people would be able to use it. We're sending it throughout the regions, but we know that it might not be reached to the farmers. So, we cannot bring it to every farmer. We cannot get this information to every farmer's box. So we're trying to work from these different structures as associations are, as, for example, different kind of advisory institutions, and how those associations are bringing the information toward the farmers. That is the next question that has to be covered as well. And I do hope that you will be able to help us with that. Let us agree to be friends on that. Okay, dear audience, dear participants, I think it's high time for us to finalize our conversation, because there's a lot of things that we could say at this moment, but basically this is not the end of our topics. We're not have closed this conversation yet. It's just that we have finalized this project. We continue our movement towards this direction. We continue in our development as well, and we will be on this path as all of you as well. Katarina Shore has left us, but I just wanted to yes, because Katarina has been tracking all of our virtual communication, and she has been tracking some technical conditions from our today's meeting. So that Katarina hasn't spoken today at this moment. So you would like to, but next time. Okay, good. Someday I will just like to thank you. Okay. And I wanted to thank yet another Katarina. This is our interpreter. So thank you very much for interpretation, and thank you for the technical support that has been provided today, that everything went well, and it would have been even better if we further on will have, starting from tomorrow, if we would have the holidays coming, and let us hope that everything is going to be Okay, that everything's going to be good, everything's going to be bright. And just to add up a little bit of brightness, we have some champagne waiting for you outside of our room. So I would like to congratulate you all with the holidays and wish you Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.